Hi, and welcome to the Right to Remain Silent podcast. I'm Jim Weber, your host and guide through actual accounts of intriguing and fascinating true crime stories as told by the law enforcement professional that experienced the event. The Right to Remain Silent podcast makes no exaggeration of fact, doesn't glamorize details, or sensationalize reality. The format here is basic. Real stories from real cops. Lastly, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Doing this will help me continue to provide you, the listener, with captivating and relevant true crime stories. Now, let's listen in on today's episode. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Weber, and today's guest is James Jimmy Stewart, a retired special agent with over 43 years of law enforcement experience. Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I am so confident that listeners are going to be fascinated by, number one, the stories you tell, and number two, your accent.
Thanks, Jim.
Welcome.
Really appreciate you having me on. I'm honored that you asked me to be a part of your podcast, and we have so much that we can hopefully ex talk about and expand on, and I hope people are interested in what we have to say.
Oh, I'm confident. I am confident. Just I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. To just hearing you talk, and all kidding aside, 43 years in law enforcement, and you did some great work and worked some incredible cases, and I'm excited to talk about those today. And speaking of that, if you don't mind, I'd like to read your bio so listeners who aren't familiar with Jimmy Stewart, they know a little bit about you before we get started in our conversation. Would that be okay?
Go right ahead. Appreciate it.
All right. All right. James Stewart earned a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice and minored in psychology sociology at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. He began his law enforcement career as a patrol officer with the Boston School Police Department. Then he moved into the U.S. Customs Service inspections at Pearson Airport in Toronto, Canada, where he enforced importation laws and thwarted contraband schemes. Jimmy later promoted to a special agent with the U.S. Customs Service in Chicago, Illinois, where he led more than 200 major narcotics and money laundering investigations, also including child pornography investigations. Two of these investigations were featured on national television programs. From 1993 to 2007, as a senior special agent and group supervisor for Homeland Security in Chicago and Portland, Maine, Jimmy managed multi-agency task forces tackling large-scale drug and financial crime investigations across land, air, and sea. In early 2007, he stepped into the intelligence leadership as Deputy Assistant Director of the Department of Homeland Security's North Central Field Intelligence Unit, where he coordinated analytical teams and interagency liaisons across 9 separate states. In February of 2014, Jimmy retired from federal law enforcement and began working with the Cook County State's Attorney in the Complex Prosecution Case Squad. Jimmy, that is a fantastic bio.
It's been 43. It's hard to believe 43 years has passed. But it's been an adventure for sure, and I've been extremely blessed, by the people that I've been able to work with, the places I've been able to visit, and the types of work and that we were able to accomplish, successfully on both domestic and international. And our brothers in law enforcement across the oceans to, just within the 50 states. It was what a tremendous experience I had, and guys like you, that were able to share it with me. I'm very, very proud and blessed to be, have guys like you a part of my that have been a part of my life.
And I appreciate that, and I feel exactly the same. And you kind of beat me to the punch. I wanted to add a little bit of my personal opinion after your bio there, where you and I worked together in Chicago for a time. And when I first met you, I was just so impressed about what, number one, what a nice person you are, and what a knowledgeable, hardworking agent you were. And I really appreciated the help that you provided to me and other new agents in that Chicago office. Even today, I still keep in touch with some of them all these years later, and we still talk about what a role model you were to us back then. So I think it's important to mention that, to let you know that not only you worked a long time in law enforcement, but you affected a lot of people in a positive way.
And I really appreciate those sentiments. From when I first started out, as a young kid, a young patrolman, in Boston, I was very fortunate that I had the right task force guys or TFOs that helped me and gave me the broader perspective of how to handle the job and gave me the insight and I learned daily, you know, to accomplish and make the success that I had. I was blessed to be a part of such a, an abundant amount of people with certainly more knowledge of the business than I had, but what I learned from them helped me expand myself, and then I could pass that on, to newer agents that had come into the field offices as I did, and it just became a matter of routine, you know. You like to be treated as you would, you treat people the way you want to be treated. And I think that's that. And I'm a team guy, and I grew up under that umbrella of being a team player, from sports, and I incorporated that in my work, and 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 that's where our successes came from. The type of guys we worked with, we it's like we're trying to win that Stanley Cup every case that we worked, and that
Yep.
that w- that and it was fun, and the years that we had together were tremendous.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And speaking of the Stanley Cup, I almost wore my St. Louis Blues hat, but out of respect to you, I didn't wear that today.
That's fine.
Well,
You know,
hey,
I
let's.
come I come from a hockey roots. You know, I was born in Boston. I was born with skates on. My aspirations as a young kid growing up was to be a professional hockey player or a sports figure of some sort. But unfortunately, injuries, took a better toll on me. And I still always had the interest as a young kid growing up, cops and robbers. And, that was always in the back of my mind. I had an uncle that was a policeman, a World War II vet, and he was my mentor growing up, and I always in awe when I would, get a ride in his squad car, and somebody that I looked up to, as far as law enforcement, and when my sports career kind of went down the tube, that was my focus, plan B. I had a plan B, and at the time through high school, um, in the late '70s, there was not a lot of schools that offered the full curriculum of criminal justice. And Northeastern University in Boston was rated number one in the country, as well as I believe Michigan State. And I got recruited there for sports, but unfortunately my injuries uh, weren't didn't allow me to pursue that. So I turned down scholarships, but due to the injuries that I had, I ended up with 7 knee operations and a shoulder operation. So
That's pretty
I'm
substantial.
I'm put together with crazy glue and duct tape. So
Well, it's
um,
held for quite a while.
so I was fortunate. I was a member of the hockey team at Northeastern, and some of my teammates had probably the best guys in the world that I was able to, still continue my role. Even though I couldn't play, I became the team manager and was still a part of that family, that hockey family. And then I was able to achieve my degree, and my aspirations were to become a police officer, and the opportunity arose. They started this Boston School Police unit that developed out of during the trying times in Boston in the 70s and early 80s with forced busing and desegregation. There was a dark cloud over Boston, and the tensions within the school district, overlapped, and it was a big concern to a lot of people. So they started this. They had house security in all the schools, but because of the rash of violence and which was overwhelming, they created this police department. And so then I applied for the position when I graduated from school, and I was accepted, and I went through the police academy, and I was number one in my class in the police academy. And then I worked the districts in the city, and as far as protecting the kids and the school personnel from crime.
Sure. Sure. So that's your first stint. That's your toe in the water of how you got into law enforcement then,
Correct.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
while I was at Northeastern, they have it was a 5-year cooperative program. So you went to school 6 months, and then you work 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Um, a close friend of my dad's was it was the public safety department within Northeastern, and I worked for the fire and the police department for the university. We
Okay.
they trained us on fire safety, and then they trained us as far as police and security safety was concerned. So it gave us a real taste of it was a mini city, and you had you're in within the city. The school itself is within the city, so you have the overlap of crime coming into your school,
Oh, yeah.
school areas, and it was a great experience, and a great bunch of guys I was able to work with.
And you did that for what, a couple of years, and then you transitioned into the U.S. Customs Service,
Well,
right?
yeah, at the time, the I had taken the TEA exam when I was at Northeastern, and when I graduated, I looked at customs again because during my co-ops they offered me a position to go to DC as an intern. But
Ah,
I had a great experience at Northeastern with the public safety, and then I was able to I was lived in proximity to the school, and I worked at a friend's tavern on the weekends to make some extra money, and I just felt it was better for me to stay around and not really experience, because I would have had to go pay my own way down to
yeah.
DC, and I didn't really know what to expect, and I had reservations about it.
Sounds like
So
you made the right
I,
choice.
I I believe I did. And then I took the TEA exam, which was a Treasury enforcement exam that once your score was graded, it gave you an opportunity to apply to any of the federal agencies under Treasury.
Let me
So
pause you there. So back then, 43 years ago or so, however long ago that was,
mhm.
it was a paper application that you filled out, and it was a paper, you probably used a pencil test, TEA exam to fill out, and you sat at a desk. It isn't like the world today where you fill out an application on your phone and you email it and you get instant notifications and things happen quick. It was old school back then, wasn't it?
Exactly. I went in, I remember going into the federal building in Boston and taking the on a Saturday and taking the test. And it was stressful because you 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 didn't know what to expect and you're hoping that you survived, the multiple choice questions and you're competing against a lot of people,
Right. It was very
that had
competitive.
similar interests. And lo and behold, once I completed the test and was continuing to work, I got my grade back and I think I had a 99 on the test.
Whoa.
I did extremely well, and
Yeah.
my grade was frozen, because my application now the jobs were frozen, and
Hmm.
the opportunity to be hired. So then through the school district, I reached out, some friends of mine that were working in that police department, and I got hired on. I did the interview and I got hired on, and the rest is history. I worked 2 years. I had some significant encounters while being a policeman in the city of Boston. In one particular incident, uh, I got a commendation for a life saving. It was a hostage situation in high school
Really?
where we got a call to this high school, and there was a guy holding a girl at bay with a handgun to her head, and it was a copycat because the week before in the same classroom at the same school there was a hostage situation, and unfortunately, the gun went off, and miraculously, the girl lived. But now a week later, we get the same type of scenario where this kid holds this girl hostage, and we get called, and of course, as soon as we walk in the building, the lunch bell rang, and this kid backs out of the classroom with the girl with the gun, and he sees me, and he knocks her down, and he runs. Well, I was 220 pounds of solid muscle. I was in pretty good shape at the time. I don't think I could run that far again, but uh, I chased him out the back door of the school, and I caught him probably a mile and a half away. But fortunately, I had put out an all city alert that I was chasing a guy with a gun, and a car coming through our district, trying going to the gas depot, picked me up, and we ended up tracking this guy down, and I slipped and fell, and the guy came back and pointed the gun at me, but then he just froze. He was a young kid. He's 16 years old, and he dropped the gun. But it
Unbelievable.
was just one of those situations that, that was my first experience of you know,
Of the
high
real world
intense
of law
situation,
enforcement.
and then,
Yeah.
just the experiences there. And then, um, I learned that the government had opened up its opportunities to apply.
So going
So
back to you had taken that test, the hiring,
yeah,
there
my
was a
score
hiring
was
freeze.
yeah, my school was still good, and a good friend of my dad, played football and baseball at Notre Dame, and a good friend of his was the regional commissioner of customs in Boston, who played football at BC, and
Ah,
they were good friends, and he called and I wouldn't say a favor, but I went in and interviewed while he and my dad went to lunch, and I went through the interview process, filled out the duplicate and triplicate paperwork, like you said,
yep.
carbon carbon
Right.
copy.
The old school carbon copy. Yep.
Yeah, it was May of '83 that I filled all this information, and then I got an acceptance letter for customs, but I didn't get permanently hired on until October 1st of '84.
Oh, wow.
It was over a year because of
Yeah.
budgetary reasons.
Okay. Okay. And
But
so you get hired on, and then you're hired on as an inspector or an
yeah,
agent?
no, I got
Inspector,
hired on
correct?
as an inspector. The agent's jobs were frozen, so
Okay.
my opportunity in the door was to take the inspection job, and I ended up
Absolutely.
moving to Toronto, Canada.
So you were serious about working federal law enforcement. So
Oh, what?
At that
without a
time,
doubt.
you were a single guy, right? You didn't have a family that you had to take up to Canada with you, right?
No, I was single.
Yeah.
Um,
So you
and
get you move up there to Canada
I moved up there
and you work as an
September
inspector.
28th. I moved up there September 28th of 1984, and I started October 1st.
Okay. Can you maybe just kind of for the benefit of the listeners, what does a customs inspector outside of the United States in another country like Canada, what are your responsibilities? What are things that you do as an inspector?
Well, it's passenger facilitation. We process people entering the United States. You, Even though you're in a foreign state, you're still enforcing the laws of the United States, um, trying to prevent the unlawful importation of contraband of all various types, whether it be from narcotics, trademark um, products, commercial fraud, and then technology, um, and the prevention. You're looking for other other types of violators, either money laundering or international terrorist organizations. It's just a matter of how you present yourself to, or they present themselves to you during the inspection process. On a given day, we averaged on anywhere from 10 to 15,000 people per day we would process going to the United States.
10
Uh,
I want to repeat that so listeners hear that. 10 to 15,000 travelers per day
yeah,
are getting processed through where you were working.
exactly. There, there
And
were
you're
there were two
you're
different terminals in Toronto. There was an Air Canada terminal, which predominantly was Air Canada flights coming to the various U.S. Destinations, and then the other terminal was United and Eastern Airlines and American and Delta and some of the other Canadian airlines that would process passengers going to the United States. But between the two terminals, I mean, even in the Air Canada terminal, you're talking anywhere from, again, upwards to 10,000, or if not more, passengers per day.
what was a work schedule like when you did that? Are you working, you're not working 6 hour days and taking a 2 hour lunch. You're doing some hardcore work. What's a day like up there when you were doing that?
We would start our days because there were a lot of like probably 5 o'clock in the morning, and you'd work. It depends on how the flow or what your manpower uh, was on the particular day. So you could anywhere work from 5 o'clock, and if there was ample overtime, so you could work from 5 o'clock upwards to maybe the last flight would go at 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So, and then
Wow.
those are
Yeah.
long days. And again, you'd work 6 days on, one day off, and then every sixth week you'd get 3 days off. You'd get the Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So that
That's
give
some
you an
serious.
opportunity to, I'd fly to home to Boston, see family or whatever, or just even travel around Canada and see the Canadian sites or Canadian
Yeah.
cities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to hit on what you said, what you mentioned, you're responsible back in the day, back in that time frame, the United States Customs Service was so instrumental in protecting the United States. For listeners, just think about it this way: anything that crosses that international border from outside of the country to the inside of the country needs to be analyzed, examined, and inspected for just the things that you were mentioning, narcotics, drug proceeds, terrorists, technology, military technology, everything. So that back then and now, we're talking pre 9/11 and pre Homeland Security. You guys were doing that stuff back then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just like I said, we were so busy daily, but we worked jointly with Canadian Customs. that sometimes they would provide tips on people come processing through Canada and then going, en route to the U.S. So we worked jointly in that regard. And then within the confines of the airport, they had what was called a special squad, and it was a combined uh, police from different either federal or local police jurisdictions within like the Toronto area.
Hmm.
So we shared intelligence, they shared intelligence with us, and we had a lot of great times together and a lot of success. I mean, we we had some significant heroin seizures coming through, people coming through transshipment through Toronto, going to the U.S. Child porn. I worked a significant child porn case. Just I was fortunate that I looked and I dug a little deeper into this guy's background and through his personal belongings and discovered some very egregious material, and it mushroomed into a major child porn case in the U.S. That we
Wow.
were able to feed to our at that time able to feed to our agent offices within the cities in the U.S. And I was very proud of that. And then, of course, the drugs coming from overseas, and it was really my first introduction from, heroin coming out of Pakistan and Nigeria. Which became my forte was heroin and the Nigerians, and as you may know, and
Yep.
it always was an interest of mine. And but we
It,
we coming through, from Europe, would get all kinds of clandestine type drugs. There's ecstasy and LSD, and a major narcotic. It was a major narcotic transshipment place. Toronto.
yeah. Yeah. It's a nonstop flow, and they're trying to evade detection. So the ways that they conceal these things is amazing. So to give to give listeners kind of an idea of what we're talking about here, there's a show called To Catch a Smuggler.
I watch it
And
frequently.
yeah, yeah. And would you say it's fair that what you were doing at that time frame in Canada is similar to what you see on that show To Catch a Smuggler, where there are inspectors encountering people, reviewing manifests, reviewing travel documents. There's agents working as well in coordination with these inspectors. Is that a fair comparison?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great, because my wife and I watch it all the time
Oh,
because
yeah. My daughter loves that show.
even though she's been with me for 32 years, she still gets interested in seeing the things that we saw, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I've been blessed with her, I got 5 beautiful children, and I missed a lot of Sunday night meals, because somebody was coming through the airport either a body full or a bag full of dope, and
Yeah.
with the group we had at O'Hare, we were on call, 24/7, 365, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so
There's
I
no
was very
shortage.
blessed that I had her to support me, you know, and my goals and I
I think I've heard a lot of folks that have been a guest on the show have mentioned just what you said, Jimmy, is they appreciate and respect their spouse and the support that you received throughout your career from your spouse being understanding of what you just said, getting called out in the middle of the night, having to travel on short notice, all these different things. And I think a lot of successful agents and law enforcement officers attribute that to having a good spouse. So I I respect you acknowledging that and recognizing your wife.
yeah, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
because we had some tough times, but for the most part, they all worked themselves out. I was fortunate. My sister-in-law, she was an IRS CID agent, and the girl that was our maid of honor was my wife's best friend. She was an IRS CID agent, so it
Oh,
kind of
wow.
it kind of helped, take some of
Yeah.
the heat off me, because they, she could better understand what we were doing and why I needed to go, on a lot
Yeah.
of these opportunities. You know, unfortunately, a couple of times, um, with the guys I worked with over here, they and especially one particular time, she was pregnant with my daughter Molly, and I had been working this 3 years of this OCDF case out of Chicago with this heroin organization, Nigerian, and we had arrested over 46 couriers, and thankfully one of the couriers we broke down gave us the fake identity of the main master of this organization. And we were fortunate that he had flown into Baltimore on his fake passport and his fake identity. And sure enough, the inspectors, I had put that information in the system, and it hit on him. And unfortunately, he got out the door. But eventually, and my partner at the time, John Coleman, who's a retired agent in Boston, and he and I flew to Baltimore. But my wife was pregnant with my Molly, and she was due any day. And we had left the car in front of the airport, and we jumped on a plane and went to Baltimore. And every March, I hear that story. You almost missed my daughter's birth. But thankfully, it all worked out because we took him down, and it was a major conspiracy of over 300 kilos of heroin, and we were working jointly with the British Customs, and they were able to identify some rogue British Customs officers that were allowing these couriers to come through. So
Wow.
we converted him from a life sentence to 25 years in federal custody. He reduced his sentence by what he provided, and we traveled twice with him to testify in British courts against some of those rogue customs guys in London.
So his
And his
cooperation
cooperation, yeah.
was beneficial to the investigation
Oh, without a
and
doubt.
served to reduce his sentence, kind of
Yeah.
kill two birds with one stone kind of thing.
And the day he got sentenced, he said to me, he says, "You never have to worry about me smuggling heroin again. I'm just going to go to white collar crime."
And he probably meant it.
Yeah. But I
Yep.
got a notification when he got deported back to Nigeria
There
after
you
he did
go.
his time.
There you go.
So,
Well, so you did your time as an inspector with customs up in Canada in Toronto,
yeah,
and then you got on as a special agent with the United States Customs Service. And from Toronto, you went to Chicago, correct?
exactly. Well,
Yep.
that's a story in itself. I sat down with thankfully I'd taken typing in high school, and I learned how to type because I had those those uh those duplicate and triplicate
Yep. You got the old
applications.
typewriter out.
So I filled out applications, with my two index fingers typing, typing, typing,
Yeah.
and mailed them off to DC, and because they were saying that the investigations positions were starting to open up. So, um, you know, I get a call. Uh, you've been selected to be a special agent in Denver, Colorado. Would you like that job? And I was excited because my sister and her family were at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and I had
Oh,
spent a couple of summers there, and I loved Denver. It was beautiful. I said, "Sure, I'll take it." And they said, "Okay, we'll get back to you." So a week goes by. I get a call. Uh, Sir, you've been selected for a position in Little Rock, Arkansas. I said, I just got, I got last week. I got a call from Denver. What happened with that one? Well, I don't know. That's a different part of the department. Would you like to go to Arkansas? I said, at this stage, I'll take wherever. And then a couple of days later, I get a call. Sir, would you like to go to San Ysidro, California? I said, I'm not really interested in that, but if it gets me, to where I want to be, I'll certainly take it. And then Cleveland, and then there was probably seven different offices that I get a call from people from DC. I said, "Does anybody talk down there?" You know,
apparently
I'm getting all
not.
these offers, and thankfully a guy I worked with in Toronto, um, Mike McMullen, his dad was Corky McMullen, who was the the head of customs in Chicago, and he was able to call his dad, and they ended up, through the port director in Toronto, uh, they got me to come to Chicago. So
But that was quite an ordeal.
it was because so I had
Oh
moved out of
man.
because I they said, well, once you accept the position, you know, I was in an apartment and which was beautiful, and that the State Department paid our rent, and you got expenses, and it was such an it was 3 years. It was such an awesome time, and I met some wonderful people up there that I'm still I still friends with. But I got out of my apartment and I ended up moving in with another inspector and his wife because they wouldn't tell me when I was going now because I
Oh,
you
yep.
know because my lease was up at the end of the month. It was like June, and because they said, once you accept, everything the ball goes in motion. So I expected to be packed. The move was come, pack me up, and I'd be going to whatever destination. Well, September 28th in 84, 87, they finally said, you're going to Chicago. So I packed
Wow.
up. My dad came up to Toronto and we drove to Chicago. And, and I get
Were
to
you
Chicago
familiar
and
with
I had asked
Chicago?
for, I had asked for a hotel close to the office. Well, they put me, I don't know if you remember, across the street was a transient hotel.
I think so. Yeah.
It turned
Yeah.
into a well, it turned into a Holiday Inn Express, but it was a transient hotel, and then young sailors that were going to the naval base up in Glenview would stay there for the night, and then they'd train them up from Union Station to the Navy base. So
Wow.
it was quite an experience. I spent 2 nights in there, and then a,
You're
a
like, I
guy
got
I
to get
went to
out of
college
here.
a guy I went to college with that was in the SAC office, Joe Alkus. I don't know if you remember that name,
I don't. I
but
don't.
he was living temporary in presidential towers. So I had
Hmm.
3 months of per diem that I still had, and I got a corporate apartment over in presidential towers.
There you go.
So then I would walk the 6 blocks to work.
Yeah.
And they gave me a G car, and I had parking for my regular car, and
Now,
then
we're talking on Canal Street, right?
right at the corner, which was it's a historical building. It's where Elliot Ness was, and the
Yeah.
Untouchables.
Yeah.
That's the building that they worked out of.
That is so cool. When I started there, somebody told me that. I'm like, no, you're kidding me, because I'm a huge Untouchables fan, that movie. And they walked me there and showed me that desk. I'm like, I'll be darned. That's legit. And I remember one day I was in a car, you were in the car, and there were a couple other agents, and we were going to lunch somewhere. I think we were going to Chinatown, and we drove by like a boatyard or something. And you pointed over and you said, "Hey, you see that over there? That's where they filmed the movie Backdraft, I
Right.
think is what." And you were the one that told me that. That just 30 years, 20, 25 years later, I just now remembered that.
Yeah, it's right at 18th and Canal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So you get to Chicago, you get a better hotel, you get better living conditions, you hit the ground running, I'm assuming, working
I get
there.
When I got to Chicago, there were 25 agents. There were 5 groups, and there were 5 agents in each group. And then my training officer was a girl by the name of Sheila O'Neill. And Sheila O'Neill, I don't know if you remember Sheila, and
I do.
she eventually she went to Kansas City office.
Yeah. Yes.
But
Yep.
we worked. She was a part of the Exodus group. You know,
Okay.
high tech
Yeah.
and munitions and high technology. And I worked with there for a period, but my interests really weren't really in that area. I was looking at the money and the narcotics. And I got intertwined with the narcotics group, and a guy that kind of took me under his wing was a guy by the name of Bob Marcus. And he was such a great guy, a seasoned veteran, and he eventually ended up, I think, in Tampa or in one of the Florida offices. But he was just he welcomed me. He took me under his wing. We would go out and explore and work cases together, and he was just a tremendous guy. And the group of guys that were in my group, I ended up in the narcotics group. Um, was phenomenal, and it just
For
some of
listener
the
for this,
cases we worked in a short period of time was phenomenal because
yeah.
I hadn't, I was a trainee and I hadn't gone to the academy yet. I
Okay,
thought I
okay,
was
yeah,
going to the
yeah.
academy. They were telling me I
Share
was going to
that.
the academy right away, and then I ended up not going until like February. But in
So
that,
you just to tell the listeners here, you were an inspector in Canada. So you went to training to be an inspector. So
right,
when you get hired to be an agent, that's completely separate and different training. So when you get
yeah,
hired as an agent and transfer to Chicago, you still have to go to the academy. So yeah, that's a great point that you brought
yeah.
up
There's
there. I forgot that.
two different entities, under the
Yeah.
same umbrella,
Yeah. So you're
different
you're
training.
in
Um,
Chicago working cases prior to getting shipped off to the academy.
Yeah, I mean, we're out doing controlled deliveries of significant amounts of marijuana and narcotics from all over, and then and then because again we only had 25 agents in our office, so we were kind of helping each other in every capacity. So I mean, we'd work fraud cases, would work child porn cases, would work, and by working these cases and being incorporated into those groups, that helped you towards you because everything was you needed those five elements to get promoted back
Right.
then.
Yeah, it didn't just automatically happen.
No,
You weren't on for X amount of years and then you wake up one day and they bless you with a grade increase and whatnot. You had to earn that stuff.
exactly. You had to be evaluated based on the type of cases you worked and did you work, a case in each capacity and each type of um, you know,
Right. Yeah. Did you work a narcotics case? Did you work a human trafficking case? Did like you just said, there were specific parameters that you had to hit before they would, move you up.
yeah, fortunately, yeah. Yeah.
So
It was very competitive.
yeah, yeah, I do recall that as well. Um, in Chicago there, I came in, I didn't hit Chicago till 2001, but that was the first time I had ever been to Chicago when I got hired and assigned there. And I'm just a small town guy from Missouri and wasn't used to that city. And when I got up there, my eyes opened at not only the size of the population of that area, but everything was 24/7. Shopping, traffic jams, construction. And what really blew me out of the water was the amount of drugs coming to and going from that region of the country. And with that, the drug proceeds going away from that city. So you mentioned working drug cases and that kind of being your bailiwick that you got into. There was no shortage of drug cases in the Chicago region. What was there, Jimmy?
Not at all. When I first moved here and got settled, I'd go out on the weekend because people you can't believe how big this county is and how big the city is. And I'd go out on the weekends and get familiarize myself with the neighborhoods and type of ethnic uh, the ethnicity in the different neighborhoods and learn the grid system, how the streets are and not between numbered streets and named streets, you know, and and I would go, I took it upon myself, here I am a former inspector. Where's the place to go? And I went out and befriended a lot of outstanding inspectors at O'Hare Airport, and they welcomed me. They gave me some office space there, and I went out and, even though it was a duty agent, I went out there on the weekends because, here, I'm single, I'm in the city. I didn't have a whole lot to do. I was still meeting people, and I'd go
Sure.
out there and I'd spend the day with the inspectors and watch them work and make seizures. And I learned a lot. And that's lo and behold, my first internal courier case while I was standing there on a weekend. And I'll never forget the guy's name, Peter Adams. And he was an internal courier. And if he had one more egg in his anal tract, he would have won a gold medal because it was unbelievable because even the
Yeah.
doctors at the emergency room couldn't believe that this guy was able to carry that amount of narcotics in his rectal area.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
amazing that that shocked me as well. These internal carriers that would traverse through the airports and the different ports of entry throughout the United States. The danger and the risk they would take by putting that inside their bodies just shocked me initially. But part of the U.S. Customs Service is you're encountering people at the border. So you're
ev-
going to encounter these people. They have ingenious ways to smuggle this stuff, and they have creepy ways of smuggling this stuff. And that's a prime example.
exactly. I mean, every conceivable way that a person could put something in or on or around their body, we saw. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk for days, or months, or years on some
Right.
of the things that we saw, and,
Right.
and then, within their personal effects and how they tried to secrete things concealed inside their baggage or inside their clothing or it was pretty fascinating. And then dealing with the international cargo, and that was probably one of my first experiences with a major seizure of international cargo that had come out of Southeast Asia, out of Bangkok, Thailand, and the success of that, what an experience, and it was probably one of the biggest highlights in my career was these statues that were manifested into Chicago on Tiger Air that claimed to be religious artifacts out of Thailand, and it turned to be over 165 pounds of pure heroin. And it,
Wow.
it was amazing. The dog, my friend that Jeff Gable, that was a canine handler, uh, his dog showed interest in these statues, and I think I sent you the pictures of them, of some of them. We were afraid to drill into the statues because we didn't want to create an international incident because they were claiming they were religious artifacts. But then on the passenger manifest, they said they were valued at like 150 to $200, and that just
Yeah.
didn't. That was a red flag there.
Right. Yeah,
So fortunately, we
when you're
worked,
dealing with that stuff, you don't want to drill into a religious artifact if it is in fact a religious artifact.
especially me. I'm brand new to this office, and this, I'd get fired, over something like that.
Right.
But
Right. This episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast is sponsored by Graphic Options. When it comes to custom screen printing, embroidery, and promotional gear, Brenda and her team are the real deal. I trust them with everything, whether it's a hat for my consulting business, a shirt for my podcast, or a large order of both. They've never let me down. They don't treat you like just another order. They listen, they care, and they make sure you walk away with something you're proud to put your name on. You have the right to great service and quality, and that's exactly what you'll get at Graphic Options. Visit graphicoptionsonline.com. That's graphicoptionsonline.com and let them know the Right to Remain Silent podcast sent you.
fortunately, uh, we were introduced in the group of guys that I worked with, the narcotics group. The supervisor at the time was a guy named Dennis Nisgoda, and he was just a tremendous wealth of knowledge and experience. And we called in our friends over at the airport group at DEA and their task force, and we converged on this shipment. And one of the task force guys had a brother-in-law that worked at a hospital right close to the airport. So we took one of the statues to the hospital, and we did a CAT scan on it,
That's
and it showed the fig.
ingenious.
We showed the figure, the bricks contained inside the statue. So then
For the
we
benefit of listeners listening to this, when you say statue, can you describe, was it like a little miniature, like a cup size, or was it like a couple feet tall? Just kind of give us a rough idea.
some of them were religious, like heads of Buddha statues,
Ah,
and then figurines of whatever goddesses and gods, come
sure,
from that part of the world.
sure.
And
Okay.
contained inside the statues were these bricks of heroin. They
Man,
they
that's a
estimated
great
it.
idea.
They
Going to the
estimated at
air
the street
hospital.
level was close to 1.3 billion dollars. Based
1.3 billion with a B.
yeah, at that time, based on the purity and when it's broken down, the cutting agents and where it ends up finally on the street. So
So what do you guys once you do the x-ray at the hospital and you get in here into a statue and you field test it and determine what it is, what do you do from there,
we broke up
investigation wise?
we broke open all the statues and we extracted all the heroin from there. And thankfully, Dennis's wife worked at the Museum of Natural History downtown, and he called her, and she knew there was a sculptor that worked at the you know to that worked at the History Museum that was able to recreate the statues in their entirety, replicated statues, and
What are the chances of that?
he did a phenomenal job. And what we did was would put enough heroin back inside the statues to keep the authenticity of it. And we wired them up, and we put it all back together. And then we called the number that was on the manifest, a couple of days later, and said that the shipment's been cleared. So then these four guys showed up in a yellow Hertz truck at Tiger Air, picked up the statues, and then we followed them to a little town just south of the airport called Norwich. And there's a Russian Orthodox church there on Cumberland Avenue in the Kennedy. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep, yep, I sure do.
So they delivered the statues. They put the statues in this. There was a row of like small Cape Cod houses, and they put the statues in this one house, and then they left. So we went over to the church and we spoke to the priest there and explained to him who we were and what we were doing. And he let us set up our camera equipment and all our video equipment inside the church. And we spent a whole week there. We stayed up there and monitored the house.
So you guys sat there for a week,
Yeah.
essentially surveilling this area where these statues were placed.
Yeah, we rotated our shifts, and fortunately, my apartment was just a block down the street, so I could go home and shower and change clothes and come back.
Yeah.
And then, like a Friday afternoon, this yellow truck showed up again, and they loaded up the statues, and we didn't know where they were going to go. So we decided we'd trail it wherever. And 30 hours later, we ended up in Brooklyn, New York. We ended up in Chinatown in New York.
So you're surveilling it initially in Chicago, outside of
Before,
Chicago.
yeah, we followed it from Chicago all the way to New York. But every state we went through, we had a customs or a DEA guy come out and kind of relieve us so we could fall back a little, so we wouldn't be,
Ah,
you know,
yeah. You
wouldn't be
wouldn't
as
get burned.
noticed. So
Yeah.
we went through Pittsburgh twice. They got lost, these four guys. It
This
was,
was before GPS,
oh
probably.
yeah, they had no idea there was no GPS or map quest, and
Yeah, yeah.
we had the troopers pull them over and kind of ID them, and then kind of point them in the direction towards New York. So
Give him a helping hand.
so we're able to ID them, and there was uh, there was two Vietnamese and two Thai nationals. So, and we ended up in Chinatown. They get out of the truck. They met somebody in Chinatown, and then we ended up in front of this house in Brooklyn. And our biggest fear was now that the electronic devices inside the statues were going to run. The power was we were
Yeah,
going to lose the power. You
yeah.
know,
That's
and
a
sure
great
enough,
concern.
while we were sitting out there, we had set up surveillance around this house. with the New York field agents. And then two of the guys came out of the house with sledgehammers and went to the back of the truck, and we could hear them start to break the statues open. And then we took them down.
Amazing. Amazing.
So we
So
arrested
they, no,
we
go
ended up
ahead.
arresting six in New York, and then they arrested a number of people in Thailand, and they all got pretty significant sentences, federal sentences. Well, the ones in Thailand, we're not sure. I think
Sure.
that their sentences are a little different than ours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's an amazing case. And, as interesting as that is, that, that kind of stuff happened a lot for,
it did.
I mean, that was very unique in that it was in these type of statues and it went from Chicago to New York. But, you know, unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, the flow of drugs to that region to and from is just incredible, as you well know from working it a majority of your career.
Well, I mean, Chicago in itself is a major transshipment city. Everything coming up
Yeah.
from the border comes through Chicago, and then it gets disseminated east or west or north. So, you're combating different types of organizations, and we were busy. I mean, there were times, especially coming up from the southwest borders, back in the 80s and early 90s. I mean, we were doing sometimes on an average day, two or three controlled deliveries, or within that week, multiple controlled deliveries. We had so much, we were so busy. I mean, we were creating statistics that at some points were bigger than some of the larger offices. You know,
And and you said at the time that you were there, it was 25 agents in that office?
we started with 25, and then as
That's
into the
amazing.
early 90s, I think we were up to like 64. I don't know if
Wow.
there were that many when you came.
I was going to say 60 to 80 somewhere in there
Yeah,
when I hit the scene, but that's just a guesstimate.
it was a mid 60s. But like I said, when I started out at O'Hare in 1993, with the success that we had working jointly with the inspectors, they opened up a new international terminal there, and they gave me an office and allowed me to have other HSI agents with me, um, like 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 um, there was Carol Check and Jeff Brown and Jimmy Gibbons, and
Oh yeah.
remember Jimmy Gibbons?
Yep,
He was
yep.
a sacker one
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
and
Well,
um,
I
Gary
think this
Gary Hartwig.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep. This might be a good point to maybe mention or briefly discuss the transition of the United States Customs Service to the Department of Homeland Security. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit. Let's put ourselves in the time frame of 2001, September 11, 2001, when the terrorist attacks occurred and the devastating results of their actions. And subsequently after that, President Bush created the brand new United States Department of Homeland Security. And then I remember at that time frame, everybody was like, what the heck? What is this? Who's going to work there? How is all this going to unfold? Maybe could you give listeners just a brief description of, what happened with the U.S. Customs Service and how it transitioned and where it transitioned to?
Like I said, for a lot of years, I mean, I was detailed to DEA, and I worked both DEA at the airport, the Transportation Task Force with O'Hare, Midway, Amtrak, and Greyhound, and then still doing the custom stuff, and then 9/11 happened. I was home, deathly ill with bronchitis and on the verge of pneumonia, and then my oldest son had just started kindergarten, and I had brought him to school, and I heard on the radio that a plane had struck the tower, and I was in shock, and I sat in my kitchen for the rest of the day and night watching, the turmoil that was unfolding in in New York. Because I remember back in '93 when they tried to take down the towers the first time. A good friend of mine that was assigned to my task force at O'Hare, he was a Secret Service guy, and he was in the basement of that building that time. And when it exploded, he lost a better part of his hearing.
Oh,
And
wow.
that just it goes back to
Yeah.
that situation. Here we go again.
Right.
They're trying to dismantle our country. And March of 2003, the rumblings about they're gonna they're gonna start this new agency, Homeland Security, and they were gonna incorporate customs with immigration, and nobody knew, who was going to be in charge or how it was going to evolve. You know,
Right.
we're going to get new badges like the one behind you,
Right.
But before that, it said ICE on it, and then it was
Right.
BICE, and then there was, I think I had 3 or 4 different badges.
Right. Yeah, me
If
too.
you
Yeah,
remember
you're
that.
exactly right. Yeah.
But we welcome them, immigration, because they were under a different management style system as to what we were accustomed to. And then then it, you know the promotional levels and the different things going on, you know to appease the transition. We work with some tremendous guys from immigration, and we work some good, um, human trafficking cases, and alien smuggling, cases like that I wasn't accustomed to before. But
Right.
I respected the type of work that they did, because there were some good agents there. What happened in DC, you had no control of, so you just hope it all worked out.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think that's a great description or explanation of, in the beginning there was confusion and there was growing pains and there were, issues that had to be ironed out, and it took a while. It took a while. And all the agents on both sides, U.S. Customs Service and the INS, we were all kind of stuck in that transition, trying to figure it out and figure our way out, or everybody's way through it. And I just think ultimately, however long it took, it has worked itself out. Just like everything, there has to be a beginning, and we just happen to be working for that agency in the beginning. So we were in a position to experience that transition and those growing pains. But I just wanted to ask you that, what your thought of it was, what your recollection was of that. So that I think that's a pretty good description.
it is. I was very proud to be a member of the Customs Service because in my opinion, we were a very elite agency at the time. Not to,
Oh, I will
not to,
second that. Yeah.
and we were well respected in the federal ranks, and and then now we would become a new agency, and we didn't know what to expect. It was on the other side of the hill, and then there was in my opinion, it created chaos, amongst the ranks,
Yeah, that's a good
because
way to put it.
nobody knew who's in charge, or what policies do we enforce, or what. We still we still had a job to do, and we had to do it the best we could. But now, you're dealing with different different management levels that don't completely understand what your focus is and what your mission is,
Yeah.
and trying to incorporate their missions into your mission. And it's like making beef stew out of chicken soup sometimes, you
Right.
know.
You hit the nail on the head. That's a great explanation of it. So yeah. Yeah.
It's
So from
I'm
that,
sorry,
from
I was very sad, because I lost two friends in one of the planes into the tower.
uh
And hockey guys that I know, that were from Boston, and
Uh,
it always touches, and other people that over the years that have gone that went there to help the cleanup that sustained, um, health related issues, and we've lost several friends. I'm sure
yeah,
you have as well,
yeah.
so
It,
it,
it it was a devastating event that affected so many people.
but the thing of it is
Taking
now, it brought the country together, at a trying time, and now to see the country the way it is now, it really sticks me in the heart, to see the turmoil going on and the bashing of our agency, and it makes me sick.
right, right. I agree with that 100%. Well, and I was just kind of curious of your recollection and your thoughts on that. I appreciate you sharing that. Let me ask you this. So at this time frame, I'd really like to discuss your um, involvement in O'Hare and your work there. And you mentioned it earlier about taking time to build relationships out there, to learn how they operated, to actually work cases out there. How did that grow for you? How did customs or HSI or ICE, how did it expand from your actions there? Does that question make sense?
Oh yes, for sure. Like I said, I went out there on my own ambition and drive to set up a situation where, I was making a name for myself, making new friends, learning the system, making cases, learning cases, and eventually, what I was able to accomplish in a short period of time, that the management was able to uh, agree with me that we needed more manpower out there, and then it went from me. I have to say, I feel like George Washington, the founding father, but
Yeah,
uh,
that's a true statement.
we ended up with 5 people out there, and we all worked, whatever came through, that was caught, would work the investigation, or would refer to either within our agency, the different capacities, either commercial fraud or child porn or whatever, and or would contact the either local agencies or federal agencies, and work a case jointly with them. So
Hmm.
that's where it started. And then as our success started to build, the financial group, and Jack O'Malley, who was the supervisor there, uh, brought on. He thought it was a great idea to bring in task force guys from different local and state agencies, to handle the financial, money laundering cases, and us and our narcotics group, expanded, and
Yeah,
we ended up going from 5 guys at the airport, which we kept like an RA office, to almost 20 agents and officers, task force guys at O'Hare.
that's quite an increase. Let me ask
Yeah.
this. I don't know the answer to this one. When that started, when you had the 5 guys out there and as you were working, were you assigned out there and given X amount of time? Hey, this is a temporary thing. We're going to give you 3 months or 6 months to see what you can do. Or was it a decision made where, all right, we're going to put 5 guys out there, you work there full time, and this is a new group out here?
I think that we were an experimental group. I think they gave me the blessing to, with the other guys, the
Hmm.
other great agents that I worked with, like Carol, was Carol Check, Scochillas now.
Hmm.
Um, got involved in biker gangs and different things based on things that she developed through the airport, and then the child porn, or the, even the money cases, and of course the narcotics, and then I think the successes we were having, jointly with the inspectors. They embraced us, and they really, um, like I said, they embraced us to because of the successes we were having, and you could see the work ethic that they developed, with the intel units out there, and the cargo people, and I think we had such a great camaraderie that's something that I feel they lack today, because
Yeah.
we had such a bond, between the two entities, you know, and you'd get there were periods you'd get, well, some people resent you as an agent because of the differential between, those are inspectors and they wanted to be agents, but they couldn't be agents. But I was fortunate I was both, and
Yeah.
I still, welcomed them and incorporated them whatever I was doing and made them, made whatever they were doing important, you know.
Yeah. It could be a beneficial relationship helpful to them
Yeah,
as well as a beneficial relationship helpful to the agents, just like a good working relationship. And I would I would guess that your sports background kind of contributed to that a little bit, like with the teamwork aspect. I bet that had a lot to do with the success.
I agree. I think it's such an important part of the type of work that we do. You need teamwork. There's no I in team.
Right.
And
Right.
you have to, whether you like the guy or not, you have to work with him and to accomplish what you set out to do, and the ultimate goal is to get that smuggler or whoever it is, you know,
Yep.
in, in, and convicted,
Yeah, I agree
and
wholeheartedly. Are there any, I know there are, but are there any other significant cases that you want to mention or discuss briefly? Any other, I mean, the terracotta statues and religious artifacts that and those dollar amounts are just astronomical. Is there anything else that stands out in your mind, case-wise, that you were either a case agent or worked on the case as support?
I mean, you, well, Portland, Maine, I had a 68 defendant case. It was a group called Fish, and they used to get this following, fish heads they called them,
Was
and
it the music group?
the music group. It was like a spin-off of Grateful Dead, and
Yeah,
they would
yeah.
have these large concerts in different places, and uh, myself and this ATF guy I worked with in Portland, we got called to a hotel right near downtown Portland, and there was a young Canadian kid in there, about 15 years old, and he was smoking weed. Well, he had backpacks full of hydroponic weed from Canada, and what
Hmm.
they were doing is they were smuggling it down. And what I in one of the backpacks, I found long magazines, like a MP5 or an AR-15. So we were fortunate, we went into this hotel room, we found the backpacks full of this hydroponic weed that at the time they were selling it for like $3,000 a pound. And then
Oh
in one of
man.
the backpacks, we found these magazines, extended magazines, for some type of either AR-15, MP5, or, some semi-automatic or automatic weapon. So we hit the we looked around just from my experience of being in Chicago. You go into the hotel rooms on uncontrolled deliveries or in apartments, as what happened in a case of yours that I worked on, in
Yes.
heroin case you worked on, where I hit the ceiling, the drop
Yep.
ceiling in the apartment, and out 3 kilos of heroin fell.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so in this hotel room, I could see that one of the ceiling tiles had been moved. So when I hit it, the weapons fell out of the ceiling.
Oh wow.
So we ended up we ended up arresting this kid. He was a Canadian national, and we were able to convert him, and he broke down and told us everything that, he's part of this larger group. They backpack across the border from Canada, anywhere either in above Vermont or through from Montreal down to an upper Maine into and they drive the backpacks into Portland, and then they'd be disseminated depending on where the concerts were. These guys would
Sure.
set up at the concert, and they were making $500,000 on a weekend of
Oh
following
man,
this fish.
that's
So
incredible.
yeah, so we ended up with, all told, myself and this Joe Robustelli, my dear friend and a couple of the DEA guys in Portland. We worked hard in the U.S. Marshals, and the main figure in this case was a guy by the name of Robert Shimmick, and he was from Minnesota. He was about a 6'11" white guy, and he ended up becoming an international fugitive, and he was later arrested on a farm in Calgary, Alberta. But we had
Wow.
we had portrayed him on America's Most Wanted.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. So that's pretty substantial.
yeah, it was a substantial amount, and uh, what happened was in a couple of they were smuggling not only the hydroponic weed but LSD, and
Ah,
they were like newspapers, and then the little squares on each newspaper, like the icons on the computer, about that size that would have the LSD on them. And they were
man,
making astronomical amounts of money with these concerts.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Hey,
we ended up with 68 defendants, and not one went to trial.
that's a huge number of defendants.
Yeah,
That sounds like an
it was
outstanding case.
it was one of the largest in Maine history.
You said
But
something that made me think of this, Jimmy. You mentioned the case that was featured on America's Most Wanted. Did you also have a case that was featured on Top Cops?
to revert back the statues case,
Yeah, yeah, let's
uh,
do that real quick.
it was the producers of Sonny Grosso was one of the producers of Top Cops. He was a New York City retired New York City detective, the French Connection, that was involved with the French Connection with
Oh,
Popeye
okay.
Doyle. His partner was
Wow.
Popeye Doyle in New York, and he was
Legit.
fascinated by the heroin traffic. And then he caught wind of our case. So they used to film that show up in Toronto, Canada, and they invited me and the K9 guy Jeff Gable up to. They flew us up to be the consultants of the reenactment of our statue case.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was such a great time because it was right in the same neighborhood where I lived in Toronto, where they had had used the uh, the different facilities that replicated what we had in Chicago. So
Huh.
it
So
was
plus
really.
an added bonus is you knew all the good restaurants to hit while you're up there.
Oh, they treated us like they would pick us up in the limo and we'd go to different restaurants, and it was really it was quite a time I had, and one of my highest, probably one of the highest um you know accomplishments in my career.
Yeah, I mean that just goes to show, in in your 43 years of law enforcement, just listening to what you've talked about here, which we're not even scratching the surface, but just the cases that you're discussing, that just goes to show the caliber of cases that you would bring to the table and the hard work you would do, because it's no easy feat. Not everybody gets featured on, America's Most Wanted case wise. Not everybody got featured on Top Cops, which is a very popular show back during that time frame. So I think acknowledging that is definitely in order. So great work there.
I was very blessed to be in the right place at the right time, as I would say. Uh, uh, Vegas luck. I don't know if you throw the dice against the wall, but again, I worked with on both sides of the fence with some tremendous agents from different agencies, and we had the same type of work ethic and the dedication to for success, and we worked and we had fun doing it, because
Yeah.
every case. was a different case, and again, like I had mentioned before, I mean, we saw every conceivable aspect of smuggling that you could possibly, in all kinds of things, in cars, in horses, in bodies, and in
You
animals.
name it, it was tried
It
probably.
was it was incredible the things. I mean, I could go for days on the different things that we came across that they tried to smuggle. You know, highly
Yeah.
venomous snakes. Was the craziest thing I ever saw. But
Wow. I wouldn't want to mess with that one. Well,
the craziest thing
something.
I'd have to say, the craziest thing that I was a guy came through the airport and he had half a kilo of cocaine in each thigh.
Inside his thigh,
Yeah, and he was in so much pain
like
that
surgically inserted.
surgically inserted half kilo in each thigh coming from down south, and it eventually, he was taken into custody. And of course, they had to amputate his legs because the infection was so bad. Well, he ended up,
Oh,
he eventually succumbed to the infection and the cocaine, um, you know, in his
yeah,
system.
yeah,
It's something I'll never forget.
yeah. And that just goes to show everything that you're talking about. People will do basically anything to get these narcotics into the country. Hey, one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you, if you would be open to it, is a large portion of your career was also spent in internal affairs or in the Office of Professional Responsibility. Would you want to basically just explain what that is and a basic explanation of how that operates, maybe? What does OPR look into?
OPR, I had gone from the HSI investigations division to the the intelligence branch for a short period of time, and um, I was there as the deputy assistant director of the field intelligence division, and from there, an opportunity arose at the Office of Professional Responsibility, where I could retain my promotional grade, and then ride out the rest of my career, um, working cases involving uh, internal allegations of misconduct by employees. Um, it's not a glamorous p- title or position, on the scheme of things, but it's work that needs to be done because there's people that that are in the job for the wrong purposes, and we would find that, if a person did something that's really egregious and violated what our mission and what our oath is, then they deserve to be either prosecuted or fired for those actions. But then there's guys that just, unfortunately, we're all human. We do stupid
Right.
things. And, you know, you just present that, if you accept the fact what you did, I mean, the computers or the computer age, led to a lot of, you know, people
Inappropriate behavior.
exactly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those are the things that we dealt with. I mean, one of the better cases, my old friend Brian Smith, we worked on, uh, and was the where an individual that was a foreign national was being bribed. To he had to pay X amount of dollars to this mother and his son. Otherwise they were going to turn him into immigration. Because he was here illegally. But he came forth, and we worked the case, and ultimately led to a successful arrest and prosecution of the mother and son. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that had
I think
taken
it's important.
advantage of this young kid that was here trying to make a life for himself.
Yeah.
And but those are, aside of the internal cases where people do stupid things. I mean, I worked at several, some that were just administratively handled, and then there was a couple cases that I had to work where we had to seek prosecution because of people committing egregious crimes, of,
Right.
either
And rightfully
especially with
so in some of those cases.
especially in the immigration stuff with marriage fraud and I worked a good sized case up in North Dakota on that where they were paying money to get you know uh get people you know green cards
Get
based
them
off of
proper
marriage,
documentation.
but the guy was getting paid just to be the surrogate husband, you know
Huh.
so it
Yeah. I mean, to all
turned
those
into a pretty
people,
good, and I worked that jointly with HSI up there. So I mean, we had such a great relationship, and he knew all the players, and we just worked, both sides of the coin, and ultimately we led with a nice conviction.
yeah. And, I think it's important to mention, Office of Professional Responsibility or Internal Affairs to to respond to many of the naysayers out there that are so anti-police these days. There are departments within police that police the police to try to ensure that if somebody's maliciously committing crimes or doing something wrong, that it's addressed appropriately. And I agree
Yeah,
wholeheartedly that that's a necessary, part of the job.
I agree with you there. I mean, we would get allegations, people, and you see it today, people making false allegations on a guy, and then, it's odd, and you can see the fear that's placed on these individuals that have, either young families or
Right.
young wives, and their whole career is looming based on some knucklehead's allegation that, you know, is false. So, I mean, we would investigate these cases, completely, and without hesitation, tell these people, if you're filing, we're gonna prosecute you if we learn that the allegations you're submitting against our agents or our investigators or our inspectors, we're gonna prosecute you. And and
Yeah.
and there were times that they would withdraw,
Hmm.
that the allegations were false
Yep.
because they
Abs-
were just pissed off about something.
right. Right.
And you're trying
Yep.
to that was our main goal. We had a great group of agents that worked at OPR, um, and we all, again, in a team like manner, we worked together, and we all had the same goal to 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 make the allegations, we were hoping they were false, you
Yeah.
know.
And I think that's important to mention, TV shows and movies often portray OPR as this sinister force within law enforcement, and that's not the case. You're not out there looking to hang people for no reason whatsoever. Oftentimes, you clear individuals. Oftentimes, you verify that allegations made against them are false and incorrect. So, that's a great point that you made.
Yeah, I agree. We
Let
try to
me,
protect the welfare of our own brothers in law enforcement.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
Well, now let me kind of transition a little bit here. So, after all those years, and correct me if I'm wrong on the year, you finally retired from federal law enforcement in 2014. Is that right?
Yes. I started October 1st of 84 and I finished September 30th of 2014. I worked exactly 30 years.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's you know, we could go on, like you said earlier, we could go on and on telling, you know, discussing cases and your experiences and that, there needs to be more people like Jimmy Stewart out there in the law enforcement world. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for all those years and all the great work you did. After your retirement, you didn't retire. You almost immediately, right? Or immediately started a new gig.
Yeah, I retired on September 30th, and October 6th I started my second career. I took a week off. I cleaned the garage and took a couple of naps, and and then I started with the ball running. I started working at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office of Investigations.
Wow. So that, and you currently work there, right?
I'm in my 11th year now.
Can you share a little bit of what you do there, like what your job consists of?
I'm in a complex prosecution unit. We handle a lot of post-conviction cases where guys have mostly gang-related homicides, and what we do is cases that have guys have filed appeals claiming they were wrongfully convicted. So they go through a series of stages, and the work will come to us, and we do the backgrounds. We'll either do interviews, um, and we'll assist the state's attorneys in either the retrial of that particular case. Uh, we do conviction integrity, where we go through and reinvestigate the case to make sure that everything that was done during the course of the initial arrest through the prosecution and the convictions were handled appropriately. And there's no nothing that is there are any errors that were handled by any of the
Yeah, to
police
see that it
departments.
was done properly and
Right.
correctly. Yeah,
And then
I would imagine your all your years as an inspector and special agent contributed to you being pretty successful at what you're doing now.
it's helped out a lot, and I help, thankfully, uh, it's again my contacts that I've made throughout the years and the different, throughout the country and throughout even the world, that I've
Yeah,
reached out and had assistance in some of my cases. Again, we work, we have DNA cases that we work, um, we do some cold case, uh, assist with the Chicago Police detective bureaus, and some of the cases they have that are still open, and that may link some of the defendants that we're currently working on, that might have a link to some of the open cases they have. So
sure.
we work pretty jointly with the locals on that capacity.
I'm confident there's no shortage of work for you.
We're swamped. We're
Yeah.
swamped.
How many, do you know, like roughly how many investigators work there?
Right now, um, I started in
Just roughly.
2014. We're well over 100 now,
Oh, man.
and they're busy. I mean,
Yeah.
we could use a lot more, but budgetary reasons
Yeah.
don't allow us to do that, because some of the trial support divisions are just swamped daily, with because they handle uh, there's 5 floors of state's attorneys just in our criminal court building, and each there's 6 teams that handle each wing, and they're
Man.
swamped and there's probably 30 some up to or more attorneys in each wing. So these investigators are getting tasks from each of those wings, and then we're in a specialized group, so we get
Yeah.
tasks from our attorneys, and there's
Yeah.
there's a dozen in our unit, and
Are you, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sometimes we're tasked to help some of the other groups, try to locate people. I've been fortunate. Again, I worked a case where this individual um, had raped his stepchildren, and then unfortunately that he was released on bond, a $50,000 bond, and he went back. He fled back to El Salvador. I was able to track him to El Salvador, and it took me 3 years, but I ultimately got him back.
But you found them, and that's the kind of important work that needs to be done out there.
Yeah,
And
I was very blessed that I had a relationship with a fugitive coordinator who was a supervisor at the FBI, and
that
jointly,
helps.
because I had an Interpol warrant for this guy, and he never left out of this area in El Salvador, and we don't have an extradition treaty with them. So for
Mm,
a year and a half, we were pretty much in limbo, and then eventually, I just kind of I had a new supervisor, and I addressed her with her what I a thought I had, and I said, what's the biggest thing that drives criminals, and that's greed. So these people, his family had put up $50,000 to get him out on bond. So I talked to my supervisor and another investigator, and we went and found the two people that had put out the money, and one was the brother of this defendant, and another one was an uncle. And that was a lot of money to this family because, they were fairly destitute. And um, we went to them and we explained, we're from the county, and we have this large sum of money still in our budget, and if we don't get rid of it in a certain amount of time, then it gets swallowed up in the big black hole. So the mind started thinking. I said, well, the thing what we would need to do is we need for us to distribute, to send the money back to you. We need the defendant, but we didn't say defendant. We need him to sign the release documents, and then when he signs that, we'll release the money to a bank wherever he's at.
mm,
Well, through the FBI's uh, technological advancement, we were able to pinpoint where this guy was in El Salvador. So working with them in one of the in our customs attaché offices down in South America, we learned that there was a resort town about 3 hours from where his farm was, where he was living, and there was a bank there, like a Chase Bank. So
mm-hmm.
we said to the brother and to the uncle, well, there's a Chase Bank there. We can wire it from our account to that Chase Bank if he goes to that bank and signs those documents. But he has to cross the border into Guatemala, who we do have an extradition treaty with.
There
So
you go.
we did telephone calls with him out over in El Salvador. We did Skype, video, and we
Mm-hmm.
talked to him, and he understood what we needed to do, um, and he was agreeable to it. So then, after it was all agreed upon, uh, we put the brother's information in the system, and one of our intelligence guys from the RAC O'Hare was able to alert us that he was traveling south. So I alerted our FBI counterparts, and they contacted and they followed him as he got off the plane in El Salvador. And then within 8 hours, there was a jump team in that little town in Guatemala, and sure enough, they showed up at the bank, and the brother called me and said, "Well, we're here at the bank." So I called
Thank
my friend
you.
in the FBI, said they're there. So they called down to that task force that was sitting in a hotel just down the street from the bank, and they rushed down, and sure enough, the defendant was sitting in the car outside the bank, and they arrested him.
That's
And it
ingenious.
took us 6 months to extradite him back, but he got two life sentences for the. And we
Yeah.
had tried him in absentia here in Cook County, and
Uh-huh.
he got two life sentences. He raped four children.
Yeah. Good. Justice is served there. That
Yeah,
and that's dedication.
that was a great case, and it took me 3 years, but it was so satisfactory where I got to hug those little kids that are relieved now that this monster is off the streets.
Yeah. Man, kudos to you. That's outstanding work. Let
But
me ask you. No, go ahead, Jimmy.
a couple more years, I think, my time's coming,
Hey,
I
you
think,
beat
towards the
me to the
close.
punch. I was
You
going to
know,
ask you, do you see yourself retiring anytime soon?
I feel good, you know. As I say, I'm 18 with 49 years of experience. So
Right,
if
right.
that's a
Yeah,
good analogy. So I
yeah,
figure a couple more years, give me 45 years, and I'll be 70.
Yeah.
I think that might be enough.
Man, I'm looking at you and I'm looking at me. You look younger than me.
Like I get up and go to the gym every morning, 3:30 in the morning. That's my peace time. Everybody thinks I'm crazy that I go to the gym that time, but
Well, it's paying off.
in the long run, I feel good. I
Yep.
have some health issues, but nothing I can't. Little medication doesn't help.
Yep. Yep. Good deal. Well, hey, let me wind it down here. And something that I, you know, I, I didn't mention this before, but I thought this might be, listeners might get a benefit out of this question here. And I think, based off all your time in law enforcement and your experiences, if you were to sit in a room with young people that were interested in becoming a police officer or becoming a special agent, would you have any advice to give to them that maybe you learned through your career? Somebody that aspires to be a cop or a custom or a homeland security agent. What would you say to somebody like that?
I I think it's for myself, I think it's born in us. I think our desires to be in this field was born in us. There's people that treat it just as a job, but I think there's guys like us that treat it a little bit more than that respect it and enjoy the work beyond the paycheck. We just the adrenaline rush of it all. The international intrigue. You know, learn every day. I mean, I've been in the job 43 years, and I learn something new every day.
Yep.
Don't take anything for granted. You know,
Yep.
listen to those that you work with. Develop develop your identity. As I did. I was very fortunate that I had some great teachers that took me under their wings, showed me like the yellow brick road, and I was able to accomplish you know, cases and success beyond imagination. And I wish everybody could have the time and success that I had, you know, and meet the people that I've met. And when it's all over and done with, I can rest peacefully that I know I gave it my all, you know.
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
I
I
think,
think that, go ahead.
you know, I think we were in an era that we had to earn our keep, you know. I think there's too much nowadays. I think everything is everybody expects when they come out of, say, the academy or out of college, they expect so much, that they should be given this, that, and everything else, and not really have to work for it. I work for everything I have accomplished. Nobody can say I was really given anything, and my merit, you know, got me to my success, you know, and
Yep.
and 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 they can't take that away from me, you
Yep.
know.
That is, that's some of the best advice I've heard. That's so true. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, I maybe in the future, like you and I both said, you have so much experience and have experienced so many different types of investigations and cases. Maybe we can do a part two with Jimmy someday down the road. But I want to thank you so much for number one, for being in law enforcement all these years and doing the good that you did. I want to personally thank you for guiding me in the right direction as a young agent and helping me learn the job. And I just want to thank you for being a guest today and sharing your stories. I know people are going to find what you've said very interesting.
I appreciate it, Jim, and I'm honored that you asked me to be on your show. Um, you know, I'm flexible, and whatever you need, I'll be there for you. You know that.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
like I said, I'm a team player, and you name a time, I'll be there.
That sounds like a game plan. Well, hey, I think we're going to conclude it for the day. Again, Jimmy, awesome to see you and speak with you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. All the best to you.
Yep, thank you. And to the listeners out there, as usual, I just want to thank you for listening and following the show. And I just want to remind you to please like, share, and subscribe to my social media so I can continue to bring you outstanding guests like Jimmy Stewart here. So thank you to the listeners as well, and everybody stay safe out there. The Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Studios. I would like to again thank today's guest for sharing the story right here on the podcast. Please remember to like, follow, share, and recommend us so that I can continue to bring you high caliber guests sharing their experiences just like we heard today. If your law enforcement agency is interested in training provided by Streetwise 360, or if you know someone that has an interesting law enforcement story to share, please contact me via the website, www.streetwise-360.com, www.streetwise-360.com.